Hello there, and welcome back to Paranormal Axetivities, the podcast where through personal experiences, outside experiences, and just through plain old investigative reporting, we try to figure out what is going on the paranormal side of things with your host, Ben Axe. Today's episode I'm pretty excited about. It's just me. I don't have any guests, and unfortunately, I don't have any Paranormal Axetivities of the week. For you who have listened to past episodes, you know that I tried, well, not tried to, but if I have a paranormal activity happen, I talk about it throughout that week. But man, I feel like these last few episodes anyway, we haven't had anything to talk about when it comes to my personal experiences. And, we've been saging a lot, pretty much daily, especially since Danae works from home now. She's been doing it daily. And, with that self-protection, stuff just doesn't happen. So it's good for us, I guess. It's good for the family, but it's not good for the podcast. I don't have any recent ghosts to talk about, but that's okay. But I am going to talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren. You guys have probably heard of Ed and Lorraine from the popular movies Annabelle and the Conjuring series. I know that's when I pretty much became familiar with them was through the Conjuring. And of course, Annabelle. I feel like Annabelle is probably more popular than the Conjuring 1 and 2, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I've seen them all. But yeah, so that's what I have to talk about. So I don't have any activities to talk about, so let's just get right to it here. And so I just kind of came up because, if you guys have listened to past episodes, if you haven't, I encourage you to. I would love you to do that. But if you haven't, Danae and I, my wife, she is a medium, a clairvoyant, to an extent at least. I believe she is, and that's very Ed and Lorraine. Well, Lorraine Warren, I should say too. And with that, we kind of had that with this podcast, and with some of the things that we've done in the past with ghost investigations and communicating with the other side. We've kind of dabbed into that, and we've called ourselves. So we could be Ed and Lorraine. We could do that kind of stuff. And then, I talked to a person a few weeks ago, and she was like, I told her some stories that we've done, and she was like, yeah, you're kind of Ed Lorraine Warren. I'm like, yeah, about that. Something happened, and we stopped doing it pretty much cold turkey. Demons, they'll get you. So, something happened. And I may talk about that experience sometime on the show. That time is not right now, unfortunately. But because of a certain experience, we've really halted. But it was there's been a couple of times here, happenstancely, if that's the right term, probably not, within the last few weeks, that their names have come up with our lives and the stuff that we do and have done. And then now we have their new movie coming out here, released on HBO Max very shortly, called The Devil Made Me Do It, which is a story about an individual who murdered somebody and his defense. And it was the first defense in, as far as I know, the U.S. court history, that his defense was he was possessed, and literally the demon or the devil himself made him do it. I recently researched that case, and I listened to another podcast about that case in full detail, and my opinion was the devil did not make him do it. Not saying I'm right. Obviously, I don't know much about it other than what I read and listened to, but that made me want to kind of talk about the Warrens. And when I came into this, I really thought I was going to be kind of rebuttaling what the Warrens have talked about a lot because of their, I want to say natural. They've had over 10,000 cases when it comes to paranormal cases. So to say that I'm going to challenge that is asinine. I can't even touch that. I've probably investigated maybe 4. So to say that, I could challenge what they've done is asinine. But they do like to jump on the demon train from a lot of what I've seen, but that might not be true either. So when I first decided to do this episode, my intention was to kind of read to you their cases and then challenge those cases. But that's bullshit, because as I researched it, yeah, their popular cases are demon cases because that's where the money is. That's what people want to hear about and read about and listen to. But like I've already mentioned, they've had over 10,000, and they will be the first ones to tell you Not everything is a demon, and not everything is bad and scary. I would say just as many evil, bad, scary, paranormal encounters that there are just as many good and loving and good-spirited cases. So, and I think a lot of flack happens. I even made a poll on Facebook and Twitter asking if people thought that they were legitimate or if they thought they were just in here to make the money. And most people agreed that they were legitimate. Some people agreed that they were kooky, and one or two thought they were just in it for the money. And so, let's just talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren themselves. Unfortunately, both have passed. Ed Lorraine died in 2006, and wait, that might be right. Ed Warren died in 2006, and Lorraine just passed away in 2019, I believe. But for those of you who don't know what the F I'm talking about, let's talk about it. So Ed and Lorraine Warren are popular paranormal investigators. That is a very simple term to put it, but they are very popular, and they have been in very many cases, like I've already mentioned, including the Conjuring movies, Annabelle movies, which I think there are 3 of them now, which is insane, and a couple others. There's some spin-offs. There's all kinds of stuff. Basically, they have their own little franchise of movies, kind of like the MCU, the Avengers, Iron Man, and the Hulk, but it's all ghost. So some feature Ed and Lorraine Warren, the characters, and then they have spin-off movies that take place in the same world. You guys know what a universe is now. You've seen movies. So yeah, let's just get to the basics here. And I'm not going to spend too much time on petty facts. I have some notes here. Generally, I'm not a podcaster who has notes because I like to give my personal experiences. And with that, I just tell it how I remember it, right or wrong. That's how I like to do it. But it's different this time. I really wanted to talk about the Warrens. So if you don't know anything about them, I'm going to tell you a couple of things here. One, they're a married couple. They got together when they were 16. At least I think Lorraine was 16. I'm not sure the age difference between the two, but I know Lorraine was 16 because I saw it on the internet, so it must be true when they got together. Ed is a self-taught demonologist, which per definition of ologist, I would say studies demons. And he's also a lecturer, and he had his own school, which we'll get to. Lorraine Warren is a clairvoyant and a light trance medium. And I found this term interesting because I always use the word medium. And again, referencing back to those of you who have listened to past episodes, I use the word medium quite a bit. And I feel like I've been misusing that term. And I feel like clairvoyance is the term I've been wanting to use. But clairvoyance is the claimed ability to gain information about an object, person, location, or physical event through extrasensory perception. And, a lot of that means that basically any person who is claimed to have such an ability is said accordingly to be a clairvoyant. So that basically means that you can, just through perception, and you can see things that others really can't. And a lot of that stems from, for example, and you guys may know what this is too, but they can kind of see auras, and each person has their different aura, whether it be purple, blue, but like a clairvoyant can theoretically look at somebody and see color around that person. And I found this interesting that Danae has said the same thing, that she can do that kind of stuff. And I never heard of it before, really. But clairvoyance explains all of that. So she was a clairvoyant and also a medium, which in simple terms means you can speak to paranormal entities, whether it be a ghost, demon, what have you. And generally, again, I'm trying to get too involved in facts here, but a ghost, the way I look at it anyway, is a deceased person, but at one time they were a human. A demon was never a human being. That's the simple terms of that. Yeah, so that's those two. So Ed is a demonologist, and he also grew up in a haunted house. And Ed claims that when he was around the age of 5, he saw an apparition that turned into the landlady of the home who had died a year previous. And since that incident, dreamt about passed away relatives who he had never met. And basically just as your stereotypical, I see ghosts, and I can kind of understand what's going on that side of the spectrum. And Lorraine has had these abilities, her clairvoyancy, her medium-esque abilities, since she was a child. And I thought this was interesting, too, that Lorraine, her first memory of using this ability, she was a kid at a Catholic school. as people are back in the old days, not to be that guy, but, and she claimed that she was planting a tree with her classmates. And as they did it, she actually saw that tree grow from a seed. That's how you do trees, right? From a seed all the way into a full-grown tree. And she was looking up at the tree that is now full-grown, even though they just planted it. And one of the nuns, the sisters, came up and asked her what she was looking at. She claimed the tree they just planted, and the nun asked if she could see the future. And she said, I guess I can. And then there was another story too with Lorraine where she was kind of figuring out that she has abilities that others don't, but at this point she still didn't understand the difference. And she told one of the sisters, one of the nuns, that she was brighter than another sister that was at the school. And she was just told to go pray it off. Can't have that nonsense. Go pray that ability away. So yeah, both Ed and Lorraine basically have been part of the paranormal universe since they were young children. And, the same could be said with me and Danae. So there is some mirroring there. But again, we're not anywhere near to that level. But yeah, so they got together when they were 16 and stuff happened. It was in the 40s when stuff went down again. I'm not going to try to bore you guys with facts. But Lorraine did think that she was a skeptic at first, and then she really learned her abilities. So Ed joined the Navy in 1945, came back after his ship almost sank, and they got married. And then they both wanted to be artists. Both Ed and Lorraine thought that they would get married and travel the world being an artist. As Lorraine took art school, Ed was a great artist, and they could have that ability. But what ended up happening was they kind of transferred over to the paranormal side of things, and this I did not know. This was interesting to me. They got started, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my quick research here, but they actually started out traveling the country, painting haunted houses, and then they would give the owner of those homes that painting in exchange to do a paranormal investigation there. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, that was fun. And that's how it kind of started out, and it just kind of grew from there. And they ended up starting their own paranormal research, their own institute. They have a museum that was part of their own home that still exists to this day, being ran by their daughter and her husband, who was also a paranormal investigator, which is kind of fun. And like I already mentioned, they did investigate over 10,000 homes. And their names really got popular, I would say, in the 70s. So that's their backstory. I don't need to go really more into detail when it comes to them personally. Otherwise, I'll just probably bore you with my reading off paper facts. But I want to talk about their cases now. And again, I don't want to be that guy, but these cases are going to be short. With each case that they have, you could probably do hours and hours of one podcast episode regarding that one case. You guys understand that. So I got 3 cases here, 2 of which you have definitely heard of, one of which you may have. I have not until recently to do this show. I stumbled across it. I'm like, oh, I got to talk about that. So, but first, the Amityville horror. That's the case we're going to start with here. And this is a case that I was really, really big on when I was in high school. So I graduated high school in 2006, and I grew up a horror movie lover. I love Halloween, Halloween 2, love those movies. Grew up with all of the horror. That was me. My friends thought I was a weird kid. I love the horror movies. I was the horror go-to guy. Very Randy in the movie Scream. That was me. And in 2005, so I was a junior in high school, the remake of Amityville Horror with Ryan Reynolds came out. So at this point, I had seen the original when I was younger. I forget what year that came out, 78 or something? I don't remember. And no, it can't be 78 because it happened in 74. So I don't know. I don't know facts. I think it was, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm going to get annoyed here with the boring details. But I did see the original at some point. I rented it or something. And then I saw the new one in theaters with Ryan Reynolds. And I know that movie you all probably don't like. I thought it was fun, but I'm a Ryan Reynolds fan, so whatever. But just like you, I thought that was true. They say inspired by true events. I took it like, oh, that shit happened. That's ghost. That house is haunted AF. You know what I mean? Shout out to another ghost podcast that I enjoy. So I took it for face value and assumed it would be haunted. But around the same time that movie came out, computers are popular in the home, and I just got a computer when I was a freshman in high school. So, I like to research my stuff, being the popular knowledge kid, I have to know what I'm talking about. So I researched the real life Amityville horror. And honestly, during this research, if I saw the name Ed and Lorraine Warren, I didn't remember it. They weren't mainstream at this time, at least where I live, they weren't mainstream yet. And in both of those movies, I don't remember them coming up. I don't think they came up at all in the movies, either both of them, the original and the remake. And let's be honest, the remake with Ryan Reynolds in '05 is basically a shot-for-shot remake, and those are boring. Don't do shot-for-shot remakes. That's lame. But because the original was so good, a shot-for-shot remake worked, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I researched it, and as I read it, I was also really into, at that point in time, I'm really not these days, but true crime and criminal justice, and I was really into mental health and why would people do that? A serial killer, which you all love now. I know Netflix is all about it. And why did this killer do this? And people kind of fascinate over that. That's how I was in high school. And I burnt myself out, and now it just makes me sad. But, so I Googled the case or Yahoo'd or whatever it was back when I was in high school. Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, Ask.com. I don't think it was Google yet. It might have been. I don't remember. But I internet searched the Amityville horror. And what I found made me not really think it was paranormal. So we know from watching the movie and maybe the basic research from that movie that the Lutz family, George and Kathy Lutz, moved into the house in 1975, and they lasted 28 days. And they claimed that there were all kinds of ghosts in the house, and that George Lutz would wake up every morning at 3:15 a.m., and that he was kind of getting agitated and, feeling the effects of the home. And some of the things that they reported, and one thing to note, before I get into that, they even had the house blessed before they moved in. And they claimed that they saw green slime oozing from the walls, foul odors, Kathy Lutz levitating in bed, and just that kind of stuff. And 28 days later, they left. They just straight up left the home. And they claimed that the house was haunted because a year or two or whatever it was before that, it was actually a year prior in 1974, the family that lived there was brutally murdered by Robert DeFeo Jr. And this is where, and because of this, it makes me believe that it's not haunted, or if it is haunted, it's just going to be haunted by the DeFeo family and not demonic. But, in order to put it in that perspective, so the way the story plays out was Robert DeFeo Sr. murdered his 4 siblings and his 2 parents. And the way that played out was he just shot them with a shotgun, basically while they were sleeping. And then that next morning, at 6:30, he went to his work, which he happened to be employed by his grandfather at a car dealership. He went to work that day, acted like everything was normal. And then that night, he went running into a bar, telling his buddy he just found his family dead. And again, this is all a very simplification of what have happened. If you could research it, and you'll find all of the details. I don't think that's necessary on my broad podcast of the Warrens. But he went to a bar, got his buddy. They ran over, found his whole family had been murdered. And then the backstory of DeFeo, though, it's not that simple. So at that point, you would think, well, maybe a demon, or the whole thing was murdered. Very, it kind of reminds me of the book In Cold Blood, even, where a whole family gets murdered by a couple of robbers, and just the way things play out. Sucks. But this kid murdered his entire family, including his siblings, which is pretty crazy. But he has a history of violence. He has a history of drug use, including LSD and heroin. There was even a time where he pointed and pulled the trigger of a shotgun at his dad, but the shotgun misfired. And he tried to steal $19,000 from his grandfather's car dealership where he worked. And between the violence and he also, I don't think you mentioned yet, his father was abusive. So between all of those things, this kid was just one, a fuck up, and two, pushed to a certain point. Between an abusive father and being a, LSD heroin criminal fuck up, stuff happens. Sometimes people are just evil. And in my personal opinion, again, I've done just as much research as you guys could have done. No special anything, just basic internet Google searches. But in my opinion, I feel like this kid just killed his fucking family because he was just a straight up F up. That's it. There was no demon talking to him, telling him to do that. But he said there was. And actually, he just recently died too. He just died this past year, I believe. March of 2021 is when Robert DeFeo Jr. died. So he just recently died, which is kind of crazy. He was around to see the success that the Amityville Horror book and movie franchise got. I don't know if he got any royalties from it. I hope he didn't, because fuck that guy. But yeah, so I personally don't believe that his killings were inspired by a demon. But it was inferred in the films and in my Google searches that they were. So then that happened, and then a year or two later, the Lutz family moved in. They claimed all of that stuff that I already mentioned, and they left 28 days later. And they claimed all kinds of ghost stories. And the Warrens investigated this home. And Lorraine Warren said that there was definitely evil in this house. She claimed that there is all kinds of stuff going on. And she claims that is one of the most demonic, spirited homes that there is. And so with that, that kind of made me as skeptical in the Warrens, only because I don't believe that the house had demons. And it's also, I think, fair to note with that all of the homeowners going forward after the Lutz family moved out all claimed it's not haunted. They've all claimed they've never seen any ghost, nothing has happened, and it's all phony. And there are reports that the Lutz family's lawyers all claimed that it was a hoax. And he claimed that they came up with this story after a night of lots of wine to make money, basically is how it was summed up. So, but that being said, as I've talked about on this show, and as you all could imagine, the murder of an entire family in a home is going to cause a lot of negative energy, and that could create ghosts. So for me to say that I don't think George Lutz was possessed by a demon, that's not the right name, that I don't think Robert DeFeo Jr. was possessed by a demon, and that the Lutz family didn't have ghosts, it's two different arguments. It's a very possibility that the DeFeo's family are ghosts or are spirits trapped in that house or lingering in that house, or they're just there, and that the Lutz saw them. And that's totally different from whether or not DeFeo was possessed by a ghost or a demon or whatever. So I don't know. It's also fair to note that they blessed the house and that the Warrens went through and did an investigation, and maybe whatever was there, they drove away. And that's why nobody experienced ghosts or spirits or demons in the house after the Warrens visited, because they cleansed it and they bounced them and they're gone now. It could go either way. I really don't know. But one thing that, they're known for, the Warrens are known for, is jumping on the demon bandwagon. But like I already mentioned, I keep going back and forth here. That's not always the case. That's just what gets popular. So to say that they always say demons maybe that's not the case. Just the ones that are popular in the paper, in the news, now in the movies and in the books. Those are where your demons are because that's what makes money. Who knows? But yeah, just the Amityville story to me never seemed too believable. Even with that kind of history of, the family murder, that would create ghost. But I think Robert DeFeo Jr. was just crazy at the end of the day. Between drugs, violent behavior, a history of violence, and a history of that kind of stuff, how can you say demon? Unless, he was possessed or influenced for that long and it finally climaxed. But maybe mental health wasn't taken, well, not maybe, mental health wasn't taken that seriously in the 70s. So the kid was disturbed. In my opinion. Who knows? I want you guys to tell me what you think about that. But let's move forward. We have 2 more cases to get to that I'm going to talk with you guys about. And the third one being probably, let's mix it up. I'm going to save the last one. That's not right. The third one for last. It's the most popular one, which should be Annabelle. But before we get to Annabelle, I want to talk about the case of their werewolf. Now, this case, as far as I know, it's been publicized a little bit, but not a lot. And I didn't know much about it until I did the research for this episode. And it cracks me up. This is another one to where, I could rebuttal it. It could be a mental health thing. But at the same time, I don't know. So this one, and it's called The Case of the Werewolf. And I have never been one that really believed in werewolves. I have a buddy who's all about them. We watched Silver Bullet growing up a lot, and that's his kicker. Ghost, nothing. Vampires, nothing. Demons, nothing. Werewolves, fuck that. So, but it's just one of those things. I've always believed in ghosts and demons and stuff of that part of the supernatural. But up until recently, not much with the monster side of things. Werewolves, Bigfoot, Loch Ness monsters, skinwalkers, that kind of stuff. I never put much stock into that. But lately, the Bigfoot has been coming around. I've been hearing compelling stories between my show and other shows that I've listened to. And maybe there is something to the Bigfoot side of things. And if that's the case, then who am I to dismiss werewolves? And so not only did my mind get kind of turned, but so did the Warrens when a man by the name of Bill Ramsey kind of acted like a werewolf in a few different cases here. So this primarily takes place in the UK. So just a quick wrap up here of what went down. Again, it's not going to be as detailed as you might get elsewhere. But Bill Ramsey was a guy who grew up in Essex, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in the United Kingdom. And in 1952, he was 9 years old. And at one point, he was outside. He felt cold and chills, and basically a strange feeling overwhelmed him. And he smelled a really foul stench. And shortly after, he was like, and that put him into a trance. And his mother interrupted that trance, and that made Bill go into a rage. And in this rage, this 9-year-old kid uprooted a fence post. I'll say that again. He uprooted a fence post at 9 years old and was swinging it around like a billy club, basically. And then he was also seen chewing on the fence, and his parents couldn't contain him. He was doing this crazy behavior of chewing on a fence, so they ran inside. He eventually came out of it. And so that's weird, right? I'm not sure how fence posts, how well they were put in the ground in 1952, but I would imagine that a 9-year-old probably couldn't pull a fence post out of the ground as a normal 9-year-old. I don't know. But anyway, so that happened. And then, that was kind of it there. But 15 years later, now he's grown up. He has a wife and kids. He's experiencing bad dreams. And in these dreams, they're all the same. He wakes up in a cold sweat with a feeling of dread. And he wakes up from a dream where he is walking behind his wife. And as his wife turns around, she freaks out. and she screams, and then Bill wakes up, and he has that dread feeling, and he's cold sweating. So that happens. Now, fast forward another 15 years or so, Bill's at a bar with a couple of his friends. They're drinking. He starts getting these chills. So he goes kind of similar to how, when he was 9 with the fence post stuff. So Bill goes to the bathroom, and in the bathroom, he sees what he describes as a wolf looking back at him in the mirror. Now, at this point, it didn't say werewolf. He just said wolf looking back at him in the mirror here. So that's weird, right? So now they're all going home. He's in the backseat of the car. They have a DD driver. And on the way home, he freaks out and he attacks one of his buddies in the back of the car and starts trying to bite his leg. And he's moving his hands like talons, as like claws, talons, as they describe, just trying to bite this guy's leg. They pull the car over and they successfully restrain him, and he just kind of snaps out of it, from my understanding. All right, now fast forward to now, 1983. So now he starts feeling chest pains, and I feel like the 80s is the big heart attack decade. That's when that kind of stuff really started coming out. And here I can relate to this. I get chest pains. It sucks. So, I was on blood pressure pills and stuff. I get it. I'm not now, though. What? So anyway, 1983, he starts feeling chest pains. He goes to the doctor, and while he's getting his blood pressure taken, that rage just comes out of him again, and he starts biting at the nurse, moving his hands like claws, like a talon, like a dog would attack somebody. Same thing. And now it appears he has super strength. He throws people around like rag dolls, all while biting and scratching at people with what he appears to be talons now. And it takes a few cops and a few people to restrain him, and they actually have to use tranquilizers to calm him down, which is pretty wild. So that was 1983. Now fast forward a year, the exact same thing happens at a hospital. This time it takes 4 cops, one of which is hospitalized after the attack that he does. And so it was the same kind of idea. He felt a chest pain, and then he goes into a rage, and he just attacks people, trying to bite them, trying to scratch them. And it seems like every time it happens, it kind of escalates. So now it took 4 cops, one of which got injured and was hospitalized for a few days after this attack. All right, now 1987, the year I was born, just saying. So 1987 comes around. And this story, I don't know if these details matter, but I read them, so I'm going to tell you them as well. But he made a citizen's arrest, Bill did. Bill Ramsey made a citizen's arrest on a prostitute and brought the prostitute to the police station to have her arrested for being a prostitute. And he dropped her off, and she went into the police station without issue, I guess. I'm not sure that's how a citizen's arrest would generally work these days. But apparently Bill's just that good at it. So he went to the police station, dropped off a prostitute for being a prostitute. And then as he was talking to a cop, he was still sitting in his car. The chest pains happened again, and he went back into his rage. And he took the cop he was talking to, threw him on the ground, got out of the car, I guess, threw him on the ground, was strangling him to death when other cops came out. And it took 12 cops this time, 12 cops and more tranquilizers to put Bill down. And, I know there are some drugs out there that could do that. I know PCP is a big one where you get kind of super strength, and it takes more than your general takedowns to put him down. But this is 1987. This is a guy in the UK. I don't know if he was on PCP or not, or if he was on any drugs or not. It didn't say one way or the other. But if he was not on drugs, that's a lot of guys that take one guy down, especially in the day before cell phones. You got to be kind of careful with what you do, and everything is put under the microscope. I mean, they had more free reign, I would imagine, back in 87 in the UK. But yeah, so that happened. And all of these incidents at this point in time got the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And he was kind of being called the werewolf of the UK. Werewolf in London probably stemmed from this story. I could be mistaken. I have no idea. I could be making that up too. I don't know. But yeah, so the Warrens got notice of this. They went and they talked to him. and they determined that he might be possessed by a demon, and they want him to come back to Connecticut with them, go to their church, and have their priest do an exorcism. And they agreed. So, he agreed. He went and they did the exorcism. And it was noted that during this exorcism, the first half hour, nothing happened. Bill did not do anything. They were talking in Latin. They were doing the whole exorcist thing with no real response. And then the response came. And then he started shaking. He started turning into the werewolf. And it was reported by the priest that for a brief moment, he actually did turn full werewolf. And then he went back to his human form. And after that, all of it stopped. He said, the last thing reported was him in 1992, that before that 1989 exorcism, it was escalating. It was getting really bad. His werewolf was coming out more aggressively. The exorcism happened, and it just completely stopped. So apparently, they exorcised a werewolf. Which I find, this story, I don't know. I would probably need to get more details before I can give my real opinions on it. But to me, this still sounds like a demon that was making him do crazy things, right? But the priest did say that she did see him in full werewolf form. But how come that priest was the only one who did? And that's where it kind of gets sketchy. And it was reported in the previous stories, too, that, he was scratching and his hands were talons. But I saw a picture of his talons, and he was just his hands kind of arched, like how you portray a wolf or a dog. But maybe there was more. Maybe I'm wrong, and that picture is just a picture to show. And maybe people actually did see his hands turn into talons, like reported. It was reported that they did see it. If that's the case, that's definitely evidence. So I have to ask, is the case of Bill Ramsey really a werewolf? Or is it really a demon who was just messing with him in that way? Or was it, again, mental illness, which wasn't really touched on back in the 80s too much? I don't know, but he said he was cured after the exorcism. And I feel like if it was mental illness, the exorcism wouldn't do anything. But sometimes the mind is stronger than the body or whatever. And if he thought he was cured, then he was cured. I don't know. That's one up for debates. I'm not sure it was a werewolf, but I wanted to talk about it because I'd never really seen any werewolf cases that I wanted to talk about. So that one I talked about. All right, guys, the grand finale here. Probably the most interesting of the Warren cases. They've made 3 movies about this one doll, the Annabelle doll. And I do want to go to Connecticut, and I do want to see the doll in person. It's in the museum at the Warren house, that again is being ran by their daughter and her husband. And actually, I know a guy, you've heard him on the show if you listened in the past, AJ Strangebrew from the Working Fans podcast over here at the Buzz. He lives near there and actually has been to the museum, and he's been to the Warrens lectures, both of them, Ed and Lorraine. He's seen them talk, and he says they're pretty awesome people, and the Annabelle doll is creepy. So I do know a guy who has seen this doll. So I'll get there eventually. But yeah, those of you who may not know, the actual movie of Annabelle is completely changed from the real story. They threw in a lot of stuff that kind of connected it, but the actual story of the daughter injecting the demon or whatever onto the doll, that's all fake. That was all made into the movie. So here is the real story of the Annabelle doll. So in 1970, and again, I saw contradicting dates. I saw 68, I saw 70. I feel like 70 is the year from what one of my sources showed. And I say one of my sources, one that I found on the internet that I believe more than the other. But so I think it was 1970, but late 60s, early 70s, a 28-year-old nurse received a Raggedy Ann doll from her mother for her 28th birthday. That's one thing to note, too, that the doll isn't a weird, creepy, scratched-up porcelain doll. It's a Raggedy Ann doll. And you have all seen Raggedy Ann dolls. We've all seen them since we were kids. They're just that popular. Even though they're not probably made anymore these days, they're everywhere. Yeah, so the real Annabelle doll is just a Raggedy Ann doll. That's it. But anyway, so she had that doll in her apartment, and I have to note that she actually lived with another nursing student as well as a roommate in this apartment. And after getting the doll, she noticed coming home and waking up that the doll would be in different positions. Legs crossed, arms crossed, just different. Like she didn't leave her that way. We've all experienced that one, one time or another. But then it kind of escalated. The girls started finding parchment paper around the apartment with messages, including "help me" and "help us" and other messages on the parchment paper. And they mentioned after that fact that they never bought parchment paper. So this parchment paper is just showing up in their apartment with weird messages on it. Okay. And they also noticed that the doll began appearing in different rooms where they would leave it. So they would leave it in the living room. It would show up in a bedroom or another person's bedroom or the hallway or wherever. It would just start showing up in different places. And they also noticed that it started to leak blood at one point. Okay. I would say if parchment paper started showing up in my apartment, my first thought would not be ghost. It would be just somebody breaking into my apartment and leaving stuff here. And they actually did think that. That was one of their theories, that somebody was breaking in and moving the doll around. But then here's where it really kind of escalated. They had a guy friend at their apartment one day, and he was taking a nap on their couch. And he woke up on the couch to the Annabelle doll, well, I guess at this point it's just a Raggedy Ann doll, staring at him. And he could feel that he was being choked. He felt pressure on his neck. He was being choked. And then he also had really deep scratches on his upper part of his body, his upper abdomen or whatever. I don't know. I can't say words. But yeah, like deep scratches on his upper part of his body being strangled. So, okay, there's something going on. So they ruled out the intruder, and then they contacted a medium. And at this point, it was determined, or it was thought to be determined, that the spirit in the house that was doing all of this stuff was actually a spirit by the name of Annabelle Higgins, who was a 7-year-old girl who died on the property before the apartment building was there. They thought that was sweet, they thought that was dandy, and they gave permission to that spirit to inhabit the Raggedy Ann doll, which would now make it the Annabelle doll. And I don't know about you guys, but I would never give permission or a spirit permission to inhabit anything. And I've talked to spirits. I've used spirit boxes. I've never really used a Ouija board, but I've crossed that line to where you people would be like, that's crazy too. You know what I mean? And when I say you people, I mean people who don't experiment with the paranormal side of things. And but that is still different than allowing a spirit to inhabit something. Does that make sense? Because I always tell it to leave. I tell it to bounce. We sage a lot these days to the point to where I don't have any cool stories for you anymore when it comes to personal ghost experiences. But yeah, so anyway, they allowed the Annabelle doll to possess, or the Annabelle spirit to possess this doll. Okay. So shortly after that, though, the Warrens caught wind of this story. I'm not really sure how that they went to the Warrens or how the Warrens came about, but the Warrens got wind of it, and they went and investigated the doll. And they determined almost right away that this doll actually isn't possessed by a human spirit at all, but it's actually a conduit of an inhuman spirit, which would mean demon in this scenario, and that they thought that the goal of this Annabelle demon was to possess a human being, and in this case, one of the nursing students. So this demon was lying. And that happens too. Like, that's one thing that's kind of scary about this field is, I've talked to several different entities through a spirit box or other means, which sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but hey, it's a paranormal podcast. And you can never be sure. You can ask a question and you're going to get an answer, but there's always that doubt of, are you being honest or are you full of shit? And they're just trying to use the situation to get whatever it is that their goal is. What's their goal? Why are they here? What are they doing? And I don't think an entity has to be honest. People aren't honest, and ghost spirits are people at one time. So, and then also a demon is, known as an evil entity, an evil thing. Why would that be honest? So talking to spirits and demons, you can never be sure who you're talking to or if they're telling the truth or not. And, a lot of people really want that truth, especially if a loved one dies, they really want to hear that person again. And people in that kind of state are very influential. So you got to be careful when you're playing with that kind of stuff. But yeah, so anyway, the Warrens determined that it was a demon trying to possess one of the girls and that this doll is basically a bad day. And they have to take it and lock it up, which they do, and you can go visit it in this house right now. And they do take it and they bring it home. And they even mention that when they do the trip from A to B, from where they're at now back to their house, they have to be careful. Don't take the highways because this doll is so powerful and that this demon is powerful enough and strong enough to kill people. They've shown no signs, I guess, to the Warrens at this point in time. And they actually did have to pull over at one point and throw holy water on it and use those kinds of biblical tools to keep it at bay to get home. And here's one last thing I want to talk about with the Annabelle doll that I found this very interesting. It is reported that while the Annabelle doll was at their house in their museum, where you can go right now and look at it, somebody actually did open it up and touch it. They saw him do it and they kicked him out, and he shortly after died in a motorcycle accident. So I think that could prove, it could be a coincidence, absolutely. But to touch that doll and then die right away, man, that's a hard coincidence to believe. So that is the real Annabelle story. And with these three stories, the word demon does come up every time. The Annabelle story, I think I do believe. I firmly believe that thing is evil and that there's a demon attached to it. And, for whatever reason I read about it, I believe all of that almost without issue. The Amityville horror, I think mental illness is a big part of that. And when it comes to the Lutz family, there are too many factors to say that it's a hoax, to say that it's a real ghost event. And then the werewolf story, I don't know. That one is also interesting to me as well. But the Annabelle, I really do believe in. And here shortly, there is another story coming out, The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. I think I mentioned this earlier too. That story I read about, listened to a podcast about, interesting. I could see it going both ways. But just one thing to notice, I think, or one thing to point out was not everything is going to be a demon. It's just not. There are going to be regular ghost stories. There's going to be some demon stories, and there's just going to be weird things that happen that as not ghosts at all. I think mental illness gets looked over a lot when it comes to weird, crazy things that, a human couldn't do this. Well, a human could do that under the right circumstance. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that. But yeah, so at the end of the day, I totally do believe in the Warrens' work. 10,000 investigations over a lifetime. I mean, they dedicated their life to the paranormal world. And I definitely believe in the clairvoyance and her abilities, just like I believe in my wife's abilities. Sometimes I think it's easy to jump on the demon train, but sometimes it maybe is a demon. I really don't know. But that's all I have as of right now for the Warren family. We have The Conjuring 3 coming out. I thought it'd be fun to talk about them, and I did enjoy it. It went longer than I thought for being a solo episode. But hey, man, I'll take it. So real quick plugs here. Be sure to check out all of the Paranormal Axetivities. If you haven't listened to all of them, go back and listen. We're in our 40s now. We're moving right along. And be sure to check out the website that I'm a part of. I am humbly appreciative to be a part of, the Buzz, WTBdotcom. That is a great network full of great podcasts, whether it be wrestling, RSH Wrestling, also a part of that, whether it be hockey, football, soccer, all kinds of stuff. And then, there's other great podcasts there as well. We have some true crime. We have all kinds of fun stuff. So go check us out, leave a comment, follow the Paranormal Axetivities, follow the Buzz on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the good stuff. You can find all of that in the show notes listed below. And at the end of the day, guys, let's just keep learning about the paranormal world together.